respect, is Jeff Bezos's understanding that actually the customer is the center of everything. And that even, Ian, we've talked about this before. My favorite Amazonian saying is, don't really be bothered about your competition, but be obsessed about your customers. And that's the way to achieve success in business. And certainly one can debate various things, but you cannot debate about the success that Amazon has had.
And defining the customer is key here as well. Understanding who your customer is. So how does, well, go on.
Absolutely. And well, first of all, in Amazon's case, you have multiple customers, but the single most important one is the one that clicks on the site and buys the item. And, there's lots of forms in which Amazonians are, shall we say, compelled to always remember about the customer, ranging from, one might say, silly things. If you have an Amazonian meeting, there will always be a free space at the table. Now, guess who that space is for?
It's for Jeff's dog.
No, got it wrong, Ian. It's for the customer. So, in Polish Catholic homes at Christmas Eve, you'll have a free seat for any guests who might come. At an Amazon table, it's going to be the customer. And the idea is that throughout your discussion, you should be thinking to yourself, okay, what I'm doing, how does that affect the customer? One other more important thing, I think, and this is really quite unique, I've never seen anything like it. The new product development cycle at Amazon starts from, you know this, Ian, what does it start from?
The back of a beer coaster. No, the press release. The press release. Sorry, I know this. Yes.
I always put you on the spot, don't I? Starts from a press release. And the press release is customer centric. And basically, you'll say something like, okay, from today, this new service was launched. It changed Marek's life because blah, 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 blah. And it's all very much focused and related to the benefits, the experience the customer has. And there's probably 20 or 30 other elements that mean that any Amazonian manager is forced to consider how the customer will think about something, how he'll accept new products, new approaches, new ideas.
Now, we're not going to be able to go through all of the management principles at Amazon right now because there are 14.
Correct.
So, but I think we just need to mention really quickly the fact that these exist because it's important to all of us who want to understand what's happening in the last mile, so the reasoning behind what Amazon does in the last mile, because this is what shifts the dial with customer expectation. And I think the customer expectation is somehow linked to the customer experience as well. So can you just explain really quickly the concept of these management principles and sort of how they might then plug into this press release at the beginning of the product development cycle through to what we see happening in the last mile?
Absolutely. So it's almost like the Bible for an Amazonian. The management principles tell you how you should operate, and they're high-level principles, and you can have a little bit of latitude in terms of how you interpret them, but generally they will tell you things like, be obsessed about the customer, dive deep. Those are things we all know about Amazon. Be frugal. That's another thing we know about Amazon. But they're effectively a set of guidelines that help you make sure that whatever you're doing, it's in line with the core principles of that business. Now, coming back to your question, I think is a good one, Ian. What does it mean in the last mile? By the way, there's a really good question coming up here, which we'll cover in a second. Why doesn't Amazon open up counter and locker services? But we won't forget that. But just to finish this point, I think that those principles meant that Amazon couldn't allow any part of the customer experience with Amazon to be subpar. And when they started thinking, and if we all think, at which point in the whole customer experience does Amazon physically touch the customer?
Yeah.
Only one point, in the last mile. And Amazon suddenly said, hold on a minute, we're spending millions on making the website great. We're spending millions on customer service. But what are we doing in the last mile where actually we can really mess things up or make them really great? And that actually is how Amazon Logistics started.
I like that. We can either mess things up or make things great. It's quite a dire sort of decision set there that they had to go through. So we've been diving into this idea of customer experience from an Amazon perspective. Mark, there's the questions come through from Jonathan. Shall we answer it now?
I think it's a good one. And well, the answer is they do in a way, but not entirely. Let me
So
explain.
why doesn't Amazon open up a counter and locker delivery? So Amazon's got its own PUDO network called Amazon Counter, and it's got its own locker service as well. Why doesn't it open up to non-Amazon purchasers to give non-Amazon customers their final mile experience? And so, still fits. You'd say, well, that's an interesting question, actually.
Well, first of all, I think they've started in a way. It's very slow, but there's a lot of discussion whether Amazon is going to sell last mile services to companies who are not only not using Fulfilled by Amazon, but not even selling on Amazon. So I think it's still very small scale, but it's happening. And it makes sense because it means they can rationalize the network. Why aren't they doing it at scale? Very simple reason, particularly if you look at what's happening with COVID. They're barely able at the moment to serve the capacity or provide the capacity needs they have. Does it mean they won't in the future? I think it doesn't mean they won't. I think they've already said they will. It's a question of where they have the capacity to do that without damaging their own customer experience.
It seems to me that you're quite right there, that Amazon wants to be able to guarantee its capacity, given the experience they had a few years ago of one of the major US carriers where that carrier wasn't able to provide capacity during peak. So that was one of the other drivers for Amazon to set up its own last mile service. So if Amazon can't guarantee itself capacity through its own final mile service, that could be a driver there. Let's get into this next part that we wanted to talk about today, which is the secret of customer experience. Marche, do you want to make a quick comment before because Marek and I have been doing all the talking so far. Marche, do you want to say anything before we go off on another long run?
Yeah, he's in a difficult spot with the two of us and our talking.
Yeah, well, guys, while we are talking about customer experience, and I just have one comment regarding Amazon, because I just what I heard is Amazon, how it works in terms of their business models, and how the business model is really well aligned with real expectations for the customers. Because currently you can just have an Amazon Prime subscription, and there you don't have to actually pay for getting your parcels, right? So this isn't only about probably all the things you could do in terms of customer experience facing the experience itself, but it is more like a strategy, and it's like in a different scale, a little bit in a different order. So it is about a business model.
Do you know what I think? If I were to say what is the ultimate goal, the holy grail for Jeff Bezos, it's to make life so easy for their customers that they don't want to look anywhere else. There's a book called The Everything Store. I don't know if either of you guys or any of you that are viewing have read it, but it's really cool. And I think it tells you about what they're trying to do, which is own you, because everything is so easy. It's reasonable. It's cheap. It's, should we say, at the tip of your tongue to do it. Okay, let's ask Alexa. And
it's frictionless is the word, isn't it, Marek? Because it all started with one-click buying. What's it called? One-click.
One-click
checkout. By the way, doesn't the patent for that run out? Is it this year or next year?
There's a couple of patents running out this year, Ian.
Yeah.
Think about lockers.
Making it really simple, and when you compare being able to search online through to now being able to receive things online from Amazon, making it really simple and frictionless. I want to bring in, there's another question that's been asked by Karen. It says, it seems consumers were more empathetic or understanding with delivery companies in the beginning of COVID than now 10 weeks later. Oh, Karen, you haven't seen what Australians have been saying. I think they were awful from the beginning. I mean, we were awful. E-commerce keeps booming, so pressure on the last mile, empathy from customers seems to have dropped. Where should delivery companies focus on now to keep consumers happy? I think that's a really good question to get into this next section about the secrets of customer experience. I feel like we're going to answer that over the next few minutes. Marek, do you want to just kick things off here?
So actually, it is a really good question. And the issue is, I think in the short term, there isn't a great deal that can be done other than seeking to scale up the number of employees you've got, and on the other hand, communicating really well with customers and asking them to be a little bit more tolerant, to not call straight away the minute the parcel hasn't arrived. But those are tactical things. The big, shall we say, the big game changer has to come in the months and years following COVID. And the only way, in my view, you know what I'm going to say, and don't you? The only way that we're going to manage the capacity is out-of-home networks. Yeah, you knew it.
Yeah.
And I'll give my favorite example as well, which will be
Nearbox.
no, it's going to be China.
Post.
So my favorite example is going to be China, because China 5 years ago had not a single, well, maybe I'm exaggerating, very few lockers.
Yeah.
Within 5 years, they have over 300,000 locker banks. Just to make it clear, each of those banks will have maybe 100 cells. Nowhere else in the world comes close. The guys who invented the locker technology, the Germans, have got about 7,000. In Poland, we've got about 7,000. The Chinese have 330,000 plus. And the reason they did it is because they're super logical, and they realize they will not be able to serve the volumes they have in e-commerce without out-of-home technology. So if I were to choose the other thing, the Pareto principle, 8/10 of the answer, Karen, to your question, I think, is out of home. And then there are going to be a lot of other things that will help, but that's the key one.
That question of capacity is crucial in terms of delivering a good customer experience. What you didn't mention about the Chinese lockers is that those doors can turn over up to 4 times a day. Right.
Yep.
And that's simply an astonishing number of parcels to push through the out-of-home network, rather than trying to deliver to people's work or even to their home, because that was obviously the other option, is delivering to their office or delivering to them at home. So this out-of-home network was crucial to be able to provide the capacity. If I look at what's happening in Australia with Australia Post, look at the last part, watch the delivery companies focus on how to keep consumers happy. Australia Post has just been setting up temporary parcel sorting centres, throwing warm bodies at the problem, getting more people delivering parcels. It's sort of a stitched together kind of solution, though. Marek, does that make sense when I say it's a stitched together solution, as opposed to a comprehensive strategic move towards saying, well, now we have to create a bigger capacity network for the future?
Ian, you know the saying, too many chefs in the kitchen, and too many people at the end of the day start being counterproductive, particularly given the fact that, let's be honest, the job of a courier is a difficult one. And I believe we all know that there are increasing challenges in getting enough people to serve standard capacity. And if that capacity requirement is going to grow, then something needs to give, something needs to be done differently.
And we have to throw in here as well the environmental side of things, because there's an increasing awareness about the number of kilometres that have been driven by courier drivers. There's an increasing awareness about the emissions that result. So if we can have a higher density out-of-home network, one thing.
Yeah, and one other thing that's topical for COVID, you now have completely contactless delivery. I picked up a parcel today, and I used my app. I didn't even have to touch the door. It's really amazing. So I think that's important. And one other thing before we move on to Echo or anything else, and people sometimes forget about this, it's not just the efficiency that a courier going to a locker will deliver several tens of parcels in one drop, but it's the fact that 99+% of parcels have a first time delivery success with a locker or a PUDO, and that's really important.
And the way you can use lockers as well is impressive. Look at what Deutsche Post does when it's got a failed first-time delivery. If it can then redirect that delivery to a locker nearby instead of to a post office for collection, that's a better customer experience in some respects, because the customer can access that 24 hours a day instead of waiting for business hours. So, well, the questions come up here. Why did other countries not choose to go down the lockers path to the same extent that China did? Well, Marek, I'll start the question by saying in part it's about money, and in part it's about being carrier neutral and the way that the carriers came together in China.
Yeah, I think what was really important, and then let's let Maciej in, because I think he wants to share something, which is really hard with the two of us talking away. But one thing I will say, first of all, I think China had no choice. They got to the situation we're in now a few years ago, and they realized they had to do something, number one. Number two, as you alluded to, Ian, they went for an open network. which made it a lot easier to make that network efficient. So Hivebox, which is the biggest network there, is an open one shared by the carriers. The third reason is they did it in the right way. Many European countries tested lockers, putting 100, 200, even 1,000, which for a big market is not enough. Proximity is critical. And the final thing, I don't want to make this a locker webinar. We can, if people really like it, we can do another one. And I'm sure that, Skyrise can link together us, if that's something people are really interested in, we can cover that. But what I will say is it's not so easy to do it well. Lockers and PUDOs work together. And unless you have this sort of volumes and ability to work together to achieve a goal that the Chinese have demonstrated they have, it really isn't easy. Because if you take America, which is the other big economy, hey, it didn't work so well there.
Macho, do you want to say something before I go off on a long run about the USA?
Yeah, I think that we have to switch a little bit back to customer experience and actually the expectations and going straight forward for the secrets of customer experience. So as a company, we are quite experienced in delivering different solutions and walking actually in the shoes of our customers. And this is quite an intensive, let's say, thing actually to do, because you have to gain a lot of trust. You have to get a lot of you need to be really in the business of a customer actually to deliver a great customer experience. And how this could be actually possible here within last mile delivery to try to figure out which expectations of the customers are the most important ones, and which should be addressed as the first one. Because I've just learned that there are like 3 of them, that people nowadays want to get their parcels really fast, probably the day before. They want to get it for free, and they want to get it with further control. So how can we actually address those expectations given the current situation within last mile delivery?
Could I address that one, Ian?
Sure, go for it.
So, Maciej, first of all, there are several. I would question the one about speed, because actually that's a little bit generated by naughty boys like Amazon who give it for free and educate the customer to expect it. But I would suggest that what the customer really wants in terms of experience is he wants visibility, control, choice, and to be able to change his mind. So effectively, he wants to be able to be the commander of what happens with his parcels. And what does that imply? It implies you have to have super technology. My favorite thing, interactive delivery management, which means you interact with the customer. And actually, by the way, you can get everything else right. You can have all these lockers, you can have thousands or millions of couriers delivering. But if you're missing that piece of technology, you'll mess everything up. It's a little bit like a car engine without oil. It cannot work.
The old saying was, customers want to be able to choose where they get it and when they get it. Now, the 4 points you've just had, Mark, sort of expand on that to make it even more interactive and flexible. But that also comes back to Karen's earlier question about how you can manage this. Giving customers all the information that you can possibly give them without giving them too much. You don't want to have an endless sequence of emails from your carrier telling you that the parcel, where it is. You have to work out what the customer needs to know about their incoming delivery. And the ability, as you just said, to change the mind, because our plans change. Now, perhaps during this pandemic, our plans haven't changed very much. We're home a lot more, but this is not a permanent situation. Sooner or later, our lives will loosen up a little bit. So it's all about that control and the communications, in my opinion. I want to quickly mention,
which, by the way, the secret sauce, and we can keep coming back to this, and that's why it's good that we're doing this with a tech company. The secret sauce that makes that possible is technology, which 10 years ago it was a nice to have.
Well, it's this, right? It's the mobile phone. Before we had this mobile communications, you weren't always sitting at your desk at work to get these emails, whereas you get a ping on your phone now, which just changed the game completely. It's the mobile phone that changed the game completely when it came to interactivity with our deliveries. Anyway.
Guys, I also learned that there are certain areas that now currently just explode. And I learned also that one of the areas that currently explodes is the claims issues and the customer support, right?
Yeah.
So this is something which is getting like, it's just blowing. So how actually companies could address that and what they could actually do here with having this whole situation of pandemic that also drives.
That's a great question, and there's a couple of aspects to it. One is from a carrier perspective or a post perspective, and the other is from the e-commerce operator perspective. From the post perspective, I've seen that some posts are dealing with a lot of claims from customers who say, my parcel has not been delivered. I want my money back for my parcel, or I'm going to claim on the insurance for my parcel. But the parcel's just delayed. So it has to be a change in procedure at the post or the parcel delivery company to handle those sorts of procedures. There's also, it's difficult on customer contact staff. It's really difficult on customer contact staff. And the other side to this is returns. When it comes to customers returning their goods, I might throw that open in a second, but I just want to share a little nugget that I discovered the other day, is that some e-commerce companies have shut down their customer support in recent weeks. And they've had to shut it down because their customer support staff were being hammered with questions, where is my parcel? And that's just been clogging up their customer support lines, and they haven't been able to deal with it. Matt, do you want to give a perspective on this?
This is a really important one, because had those companies thought ahead, because for me, and I had this today, by the way, I called a supplier, I won't name the company, and I waited 32.5 minutes on the customer helpline, at which point I was cut off. I really needed to speak, so I did it again. Interestingly, they got a funny system, because it seems that after 32.5 minutes, that's when it cuts you off. No message, no apology, no callback. What do you think my feeling about that company is right now?
It's not a good customer experience.
So I think, had they thought before, had they implemented systems that would automate as much of the process as possible, they could have avoided this. Because let's be very honest, probably 80% of most of the calls are going to be very standard. Where's my parcel? Very simple claims calls that can be self-service. And it amazes me that large organizations haven't done anything here. I don't know, Maciej, have you got any sort of feelings or experience from this field?
Actually, we do. We even have a case study about it, what we did for one of the Norwegian companies in terms of handling customer support. But I think that we can go to the case study a little bit later on, because I still feel that we didn't answer actually a question regarding the current change in terms of the returns, the lockers, and what could actually be the postal operator's future. And there's a question coming from me, but it was submitted on the form for the webinar registration. And is there anything that we would like to address here?
I think, Ian, you're me.
Okay, I'll be as brief as I can, because we're really talking about customer experience when it comes to e-commerce and parcel delivery. But for postal operators, letters is a big thing. So the fact that letter volumes have largely gone down during the last 8 weeks has ramifications for the parcels network, because of the way that posts are operated. But I suspect that that's probably a conversation that we can't have today, because otherwise I might just break down in tears.
I haven't seen that before.
I can get quite emotional about letters, Matic. But it does sort of beg the question about what is an essential service. Okay, so we've seen a lot of people say, a lot of governments have nominated delivery services, not just the post, but private carriers, as being an essential service. And what will that mean in the future? Will they still be considered essential services? And if so, do they need to be regulated more than they currently are? Do there need to be performance guarantees imposed that don't currently exist? I know that we're reaching into the world of regulation, which is sort of complementary in some respects, but also against the customer experience, because you know what I mean? That there's things like EU directives can be focused on the consumer. So we might see out of all of this increased attention at an EU level on guarantees of delivery, on returns, and all these sorts of things which are somehow related to the customer experience.
How about we take a step back and look strategically? Because I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of mail. Like it or hate it, letters are in decline and they will continue to decline. There's no reason or nothing that can, in my view, stop that happening. So that's their former bastion. On the other hand, e-commerce related volumes are exploding. And I think everybody here will agree that COVID will only speed that up. Yeah. So you've got a scenario where the world is changing, and you're going to have, in my view, two types of posts, probably more, but let's say two key types. One type is going to be the type that embraces the change and says we cannot continue as we have been. We need to invest in new capabilities, lockup capability, IDM, customer experience related capability. And we need to really say, at last, hold on, let's open up our network. Let's share that infrastructure, because we will also win, because more volumes will come and more people will use the network that's there. That's going to be, I think, the group that will succeed. And then you're going to have the group that's like this and says, no, our castle is our fortress. We're not letting anyone in. We're not going to change because that's how we've always been. And those, I'm afraid, are going to be the Polaroids of the postal world. And either they will be continually bailed out by governments and will be more and more inefficient, or they'll have to change that view. I know that's a little bit sort of black and white. I'm interested whether you guys have a view here.
Well, Marek, I think you set out an interesting proposition there for the future of the post. In a discussion that you and I had earlier relating to the customer experience, though, was that posts have been too slow in adopting best practice in customer experience, in particular interactive delivery management. That is empowering the customer to make in-flight changes, giving the customer the information that they need the day before delivery, the day of delivery, and so on and so forth. We've seen that posts have been, some would say they've been hamstrung, they've been held back by their legacy infrastructure, but...
Or legacy thinking.
Or legacy thinking. So, given that posts in many countries carry the majority of B2C e-commerce volume, it's really important for them to increase their level of customer experience, their quality of customer experience, because if they don't, they'll see what happens. The same thing that happened to Royal Mail and is happening in the USA will happen in their backyard. That is, Amazon will set up its own delivery network and will take away the nice volumes, because Amazon is not going to be delivering to those remote communities. That's, by the way.
And to be honest, Ian, as you remember, that you quoted the US case, the UK, it's exactly the same. Amazon Logistics UK started as a direct result of the fact that Royal Mail was not able to deliver capacity and customer-centric features. And like it or hate it, that's where we are.
So if you look at Amazon's customer experience, coming back to Amazon and their customer experience in the last mile, that should be your minimum standard. If you're a carrier of any description, a private carrier, a courier, a same-day operator, or a post, that should be your benchmark. That's what you should be looking to exceed. And there are posts around the world who I think do a very good job. There are private operators who do a very good job. They've just got to continue to do a better job than Amazon, right?
Absolutely. And the truth, Amazon will always seek to have partners. They will never put all their eggs in one basket. Even with Amazon Logistics, the volume is booming and they will have parcels to be shared. But who will get those parcels? The operator that is most customer-centric and most able to offer Amazon customers the customer experience and, of course, the capacity at peak times.
Now, we've been getting a lot of questions coming in, but Maciej, I know we wanted to delve into a case study.
Exactly.
Do that at this point, I feel like we've sort of reached a good point to do that now, and then we can come back and get into some other questions.
Because we are
About
talking
kudos
about,
and things like that. So Marche, take it away.
we are talking about customer experience, right? And it's all the way customer experience, but what actually is it, and how to deal with it, and how to incorporate it into your organizations? So this is kind of an interesting question. So we've been a company that is doing actually that with many different customers. And what I said at the very beginning, that customer experience is more like a strategy being in a place in a company. And people like need to think customer centric and place the customer always in the first place. And this is actually what we do all the time. And while working with our customers, we analyze the steps in a customer journey. So if we are talking about customer experience, then we can do it like, both ways. We can handle it from the customer experience strategy point of view, but this is not something that can be easily incorporated now in this dynamic world when we have a pandemic situation. And I believe so that most companies should turn a little bit towards the moments of delight for the customers. This is something that can be really fastly incorporated and used by companies, and how you actually can do this. So this is something we do all the time. And the first thing you should figure out, and what you should do while implementing customer experience design processes in your company, is to just lay out the behavior of your companies. And it only sounds simple, but it isn't. Like, it's about getting the customer journey map. You need to think about the emotions of your customers. And before you even do it, you have to be aware of the personas and who the customers are. This is what you, Ian, actually asked at the very beginning of this webinar. And I'm really frightened, because when I cooperate with many different companies, it seems that they do not actually even know who are their customers. They are here on the market because of the product and the price, and they somehow managed to go there. But now there's a change, and I've been recently reading a report from a Walker company, actually a big customer experience consultation company, and then they stated out that now it is the time when it is not about the quality of the product service, it's not about the price, it is about the customer experience, which will now drive the lead on different markets, not only last mile delivery, right? But getting back into some details of our case study that we have did for our customers. So we have mapped out the whole customer journey. We identified key questions, challenges, pains, thresholds, and we identified, we call it within our branch, we call them touch points. So customers get into interactions with your companies, and we call those interactions and those parts of your company the touch points, upon which you should look upon and decide whether these touch points are severely struck by the current situation, or perhaps your customers do not feel right about them. So going deeper into the case study we did for high-tech mobility from Norway, we mapped out the whole journey. We identified the most severe and the most problematic part, which was customer support. And over here, we managed to go also into details, because it is, in most often cases, it's just going into details of the details. So you really hit the point and the real particular reason why do you actually want to do something about a particular service, or even a part of the service. And there is also a technique over here within the customer experience and design. We call it 5 whys. So you have to answer yourself the question why 5 times actually to get to the raw problem and to the cause of a particular problem. So we did that for our customer. We actually, as I told you at the very beginning, we love to be in customers' shoes. So we even went to Norway. We conducted several different field researches with people working within customer support. And we figured out what are the problems. So you have to keep in mind that no system or service is flawless, but you can recognize its quality and how fast and in what kind of manner the problems and complaints are handled. So we identified it by asking several different questions. Some of them were how easy it is for a customer to reach out a support team. If she or he uses a form or any other written form of communication, does she or he receive a confirmation that the case is taken care of? How much time does a support person need to spend to access the right information? Sometimes it's people, as you just said, Marek, a little bit earlier, that companies, the big ones, are also dealing with some legacy systems. And probably there are just really simple solutions to those that you can actually grab the opportunity of fixing really small things, these moments of delight, which I was talking about, and having them reintroduced into the systems. And then perhaps the queue of dealing with customer support deals and issues might get even shorter, right? So all in all, the problem with our customer was that he was just flooded with customer requests, both claims, some issues, some tickets, and he needed to do something about it because the customers, as you might just figure out, weren't pleased. They needed sometimes to wait even 10 days to get an answer from the support team. So it's really, really long. And we did our job in terms of redesigning the whole process of a customer support system. And you know what? The results were like unexpected, because we didn't think that we can shorten the time needed for processing each case by even 10 times. So the whole effort done over here led us to a position that we shortened 10 times the queue of the tickets, the claims customers were after. And the time was only the cause why it was so long was really late in some glitches, some legacy systems used by the employees to handle those. So the general conclusion over here is that sometimes you need to have a different approach and a different look on the systems actually that you have in your company, which are dealing with particular cases. So imagine that particular on Monday an issue is raised and it gets number 100, and it used to take 10 working days to address it, and now it is solved in 1 day. So it's a pretty big change, and this is one of the moment of delight that we created for the customers. We also tested the feedback from the customers. How do they perceive now the customer service in their company? And the answers were really, really good over here.
Interesting talking about moments of delight and customer service, because they almost seem incompatible in the modern age, don't they? The idea of having moments of delight when dealing with customer service, especially after Marek described earlier how he spent half an hour on hold twice to not speak to someone. So being able to streamline that and make it customer centric is an amazing thing. If people have questions for Maciej on what he's just described, please do chuck them in the chat. Do you have anything else you want to share on that, Maciej, before we move on to maybe answering some other questions that have come through?
Can I just make one point before Maciej comes in? Because I think this is part of Amazon's success, the fact they've realized that the customer service and customer experience are so intertwined. And I believe that if we look at our last mile world, it's an area that hasn't been dealt with as far as is possible. Sometimes within the express world, yes, but generally speaking, on the postal side, it's, I think, dismal in most cases, and there's an awful lot that could be done. And if I understand correctly, Maciej, what you've really done is you added two things. You were able to step back, because these guys, I'm sure they were smart guys, but because they were living it, they weren't able to do what you could do. And the second thing, you could, in a very agile manner, adapt to their legacy systems to create something that worked.
Yeah, exactly. And it is about, the way, it is all about the way of thinking. So you really need to observe those situations and what currently could go wrong within the whole process of managing, in these terms, the customer support system, right? And in terms of having the customer journey, I would like to turn to that question that actually have posted over here, because what we found out actually is that in terms of the whole customer experience, like, we are all people like tech savvy, so we feel that technologies should serve us. We don't want to get like solutions that are not that understandable. We want them to be really straightforward. We can use it. We are used to Uber, we are used to Airbnb, etc. And I'm really interested in the question about the PUDOs, because the PUDOs is something that is coming in between, and it actually generates a new interaction point. And is it something that is here for longer? And what are your thoughts about it?
Ian, who kicks off?
Oh, look, I'll tell you, I'll try and be short about it. PUDOs, bearing in mind, everybody, I have a post office background, and I think that post offices are the ultimate PUDOs. And by the way, if you don't know what PUDO is, we're talking about pick up, drop off. So in other words, where you can lodge a parcel and where you can collect the parcel, where the customer, that is, can lodge a parcel and the customer can collect a parcel. I've seen that it has become increasingly important to offer an out-of-home option, even as a post. And there are a number of reasons for that, and many are related to the consumer, the recipient, and some are actually related to it just from an operational perspective. In other words, cost. If you send that parcel directly to a post office or to a PUDO point for customer collection, that's cheaper than it going out, having a failed first-time delivery, and then going back to a PUDO point or going back to a post office, or worse still, to a delivery facility for customer collection. So it's cheaper, and also the customer has longer to collect it because the parcel is being delivered in the morning, usually, so by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock thereabouts. So the customer actually has all day instead of waiting for a failed first-time delivery and then it being sent back to the PUDO or the post office for collection. So the customer also has control. We were talking earlier about the customer being in control of their delivery. So if the customer nominates that PUDO point, it's important from the customer's perspective that they're able to do that. So, and when I think about my own personal experiences as a customer, if I would rather have a guaranteed first-time delivery to a PUDO or a locker than a maybe first-time delivery to my home. But again, that's my personal experience. Marek.
Well, first of all, spot on. I fully agree. It's dangerous. We seem to be agreeing quite a lot recently, Ian.
It's worrying.
What we need to bear in mind, actually, is first of all, a PUDO is effectively just a manual version of a locker, and a locker is an automated version of a PUDO. They do the same thing. Lockers tend to be more efficient. They don't get sick. They don't have bad days, but actually it does the same thing. And they work very well together because despite all of the advantages of a locker, above all being, as I said, they don't get sick, they don't take tea breaks, they're open in many cases 24/7. One disadvantage is that a locker is a piece of metal which you cannot stretch. Although I have to say, I was shocked today. Can you imagine the first time ever I picked up 2 parcels within one locker cell? So you can make them actually have more capacity than you'd think. And Ian, as you said before, certainly in Poland, I think InPost is now delivering 4 times a day to those lockers. But they're still a piece of metal. A PUDO, because it's people, And because you can always ask them to, at peak time, take a few more parcels, is more flexible in that respect. So the two work together. And the final thing, a PUDO can be set up like that. If you have somebody really great preparing the software, you can add on at peak time, at COVID time, maybe 10, 20 new points to cover that volume. So I think, first of all, the two are intertwined. Secondly, completely agree, Ian, with you that people want the choice. And after COVID, I think in many cases people want it more because they'll want that independence, of course, subject to the ability to leave their homes to reach a PUDO point.
The other question raised there was, will the customer be happy to collect the shipment from a retailer during an age of social distancing and isolation and all of that? My experience is yes, they are, because the access to post offices, at least, has been very tightly controlled, and limited number of people within the post office, social distancing within the post office. So yes, they are, but there's been, obviously with everybody working from home, if you have residential delivery, the parcels have been generally going to a home delivery point. The interesting thing was places like Lithuania, our friends at Lithuanian Post, where they've seen a real growth in parcel lockers and an increased turnover of parcels within their lockers during the pandemic, which is almost counterintuitive, but it was viewed as a contactless solution.
We've got Ian, we've got exactly the same in Poland. The big Polish, and frankly, there's only one big Polish locker player, is more or less achieving next year's planned peak volume now.
Marce, can we go on to a few questions in the few minutes we have left?
We could go on, but just before we go there, I just have one proposition for everyone who managed to join us here for this webinar. And together with my co-hosts, with Marek and Ian, we thought that customer experience is such a big area to address that we would actually need more time for that. So to address that, we thought that we can deliver you guys a 3 hour of customer experience consultation. So I'm drawing now a button over here at this webinar. Just if you feel that your company has particular problems over here, would need some support, just sign up. Please remember that we have just 10 slots for different companies that may have some certain issues that they want to raise, but they don't want to raise it public here on this webinar. So I'm just tossing this button now, and it's here. So if you are interested in having a consultation, just feel free to sign up.
So click that red button that says sign up now if you think that your company needs a bit more help when it comes to the customer experience. We've got just a few minutes left before we wrap up. Marek, questions coming through from, is it Davide or David? I'm not sure, but can Key Amazon service, that's Amazon Key, where they deliver directly into your apartment, can that be adopted by other carriers to increase first-time delivery? Well, I think the pioneer in that was, of course, Post Nord. So, Marek, over to you.
So, you know, I'm a big fan of smart lock technology and everything around it. So, Amazon Key specific, but there are other technologies. In the Nordics, you've got Assa Abloy. We got our friends, I think, Lori in Finland. So, that technology is really cool. What we need to bear in mind, though, one of the big advantages of lockers and PUDOs is that you have multiple drops of parcels with one stop.
Yep.
So this doesn't resolve the carbon footprint, the inefficiency, but it does mean at least you have a guaranteed first-time delivery. So I can imagine that, yes, there will be use cases. I don't think it is an alternative to PUDOs and lockers, in the sense alternative that you cannot have the other. You have to have both of them. But I think it will be increasingly important. I can imagine you're going to have Amazon Key or Assa Abloy type services allowing access to a concierge room where you can put bigger items that won't fit into a locker.
So there are all kinds of ways that this could play out. And I know there's been great feedback from customers who have used these services. bpost did a trial where the customers want to continue. I think you said that Asa Abloy or someone had a trial where the customers didn't want to give their locks back. They wanted to continue to use it. So customers love it. The question is, how's it also going to be priced? Because there's another question that David, I want to say David, but could be David, asked, which was, which options do e-retailers have to mitigate the cost increase in the last mile? And Marek's going to say parcel lockers and PUDOs. I just want to throw another prawn on the barbie here, which is using the cost at checkout or other means to suggest cheaper delivery options. And I did a really interesting podcast with on this a few months ago, talking about the order in which the retailer presents the delivery options. Do you remember this one, Marek? The order in which so if you set up the greenest first or the cheapest first, in the way, the hope that the customer will be nudged towards that. Some retailers are trying that as a way to reduce the number of parcels that go to the doorstep and increase the number that go to the PUDOs.
The only thing I would say is, David, you've got to be very careful here in the sense, and this is something Amazon has really understood, it's actually not about cost, because you can save cost, and if the customer experience is poor, you lose the customer. What's the point of operating at all? So Amazon will always first say, how do we achieve the right level of customer experience? That's question one. Question two, okay, how do we do it at reasonable cost? Not the other way around. And if you look, there's a really interesting story. This isn't for today, but if you look at Alibaba in Europe and Amazon in Europe, Alibaba, who are extremely successful in China, have been somewhat less than successful. I'll tell you, I'm not going to use them given my own personal experiences until they change. Whereas Amazon, they have really invested in getting that last mile right. So I think the first question should be related to customer experience, and the second one should be, okay, what can we do? And there are a lot of things that can be done.
Another great question here, which was lodged before the session. How can we ensure posties, we call them in Australia, can be customer oriented? What a great question. I know that DPD UK has a rate your driver system. bpost had an interesting thing. Allied to this smart lock trial that bpost did about a year or two ago, you would know who your postman was. So you'll be told who would be delivering your parcel that day. So this is an interesting thing about it's such a great question, and it ties into this legacy thinking, doesn't it, Marek?
Absolutely. And it's, it's a really big subject, but I think part of it, in fact, the most important part is education, and in a positive way, not dictating, hey, this is the person you've got to be nice to, but explaining why, and having systems. And this is, again, where technology is key. At Amazon, a lot of the partners, particularly Amazon Flex, which is a crowdsourced model, are not people that can be, Amazonized or trained prior to their first delivery, at least trained enough. So the system has to be such that it makes sure you do the right thing. And the sort of things you can do in the system, there's some from the operational point of view that you cannot make a delivery unless you're at the right geocode. So that's controlling the customer experience from an operation perspective. The second could be, smile and then allow the customer to give you a rating like Uber does. Now, those are a few simple things that mean that you get a very quick response. So if Ian, who's nice, smiley, friendly as a postie, comes up, he'll get 5 stars. Then you got Marek, who's disgruntled, unhappy and complaining. He'll get 1 point.
Smells of alcohol, yes.
Absolutely. Me, Polish guy smelling of alcohol, never. So, I think there's an awful lot that can be done, but it's not about cost. It's not about not being able to do it, because often it's not a big investment. It's about taking a decision to do something. Like the example that Maciej gave earlier.
A quick one, at least one more quick one, because I know it's just ticked over to 5 o'clock. One of the questions was asked in advance. It ties into what I think it was Karen asked earlier on. How have customer expectations changed after 6 or 8 weeks of COVID-19? How does this impact the journey in the last one? I'll remember, everybody, click on the button up there if you want to sign up for the customer experience.
Myself, listen, if no one else does, because I'll tell you what. I don't know about what you guys feel, but from my perspective, all COVID has done is to, I would say, accelerate changes that are happening anyway. So you've got effectively two things: more items that people wouldn't typically buy online, fresh items, grocery, pantry items, have been bought. And I think the second thing that's happened, a group of users, probably people slightly older who wouldn't normally choose online buying, have started buying. So you're going to get new users, new user habits, and new things that they buy. And that's going to have a big impact on volumes, the type of things that are delivered, the need for more grocery, pantry, same-day delivery.
And those new shoppers, they will expect a good customer experience. Otherwise, they'll just go back to the old way. So this is a unique opportunity to capture those new shoppers, make it such a great experience. Not just, I'm only doing it because I can't go to the shops. Make it, I want to do this because it's a great customer experience, it's convenient to me, and so on. Marche, do you want to add anything? Because I think we've already run over time, but that's the problem when you invite two chatterboxes on.
We are hitting the deadline, and actually customer experience is a huge topic we could comment on, and we could still get the discussion rolling. I believe so that we are just coming to a closure. So actually, I would like to thank you guys for having you over here. So thank you, Marek. Thank you, Ian, for driving also the whole conversation in terms of the change which is currently happening in the last mile delivery. So thank you also all of you for attending the webinar. Next webinars delivered by Skyrise are just upcoming, so please follow us on LinkedIn as well, and our company website. We publish those information on a regular basis.
And remember to follow Marek and me on LinkedIn, or connect with us on LinkedIn as well. There's a blatant plug as well at the end. Thanks, everybody. Remember to sign up for the free consult. It's up there or over there, wherever it is. And thank you all for your questions today and for being part of it. And Marek, thank you as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.